My jaw literally dropped. I replayed the Ring camera footage, then replayed it again just to make sure my eyes weren't deceiving me. There she was, my brand new neighbor, Karen, standing bold as brass on my front lawn, watching her SIX Shih Tzus turn my grass into their personal toilet. And then the kicker. She looked straight at my front window, straight at where she had to know my camera was, and she let out this smug, chilling little laugh. That laugh. It wasn't just dismissive. It was triumphant. Little did she know, that single, arrogant cackle, captured in glorious HD, was about to become the star exhibit in her own eviction hearing. And the cherry on top? The HOA president who brought the hammer down was my very own next-door neighbor. My name is Sarah, and honestly, my life before Karen was the definition of suburban calm. I'm a graphic designer, and I work from home, which means my house isn't just where I live. It's my office, my creative space, my sanctuary. I'm a woman who treasures her peace and quiet, and my little patch of front lawn, though not enormous, was something I poured love and effort into. The flower beds were my therapy, the perfectly edged grass my quiet boast. We live in an HOA community, which, for the most part, just meant everyone kept their places looking nice and followed a few reasonable rules. It was orderly. My immediate neighbor, Mr. Henderson, the HOA president, is a man I've always respected. He's retired, a bit formal perhaps, but unfailingly fair. We'd have those classic over-the-fence chats about the weather or whose roses were doing better that year. I always ensured my property was pristine, partly out of personal pride and partly, let's be honest, because living next to the HOA president, you want to be seen as a model resident. For general security, especially since my partner travels for work quite a bit leaving me on my own, I'd installed a Ring doorbell and a couple of other small outdoor cameras. I never dreamed they'd be used for anything other than spotting the occasional raccoon or confirming a package delivery. Life was wonderfully, beautifully mundane. Until Karen arrived. The moving trucks rumbled onto our quiet street on a Tuesday morning. I remember watching from my office window, a natural curiosity about who my new neighbors across the street would be. And then I saw her, emerging from a gleaming white SUV, like she owned the entire block. Karen. Even from a distance, the vibe was unmistakable. She had that sharply sculpted, aggressively blonde haircut that seemed to be standard issue for a certain type of personality. Oversized sunglasses, even on a day that threatened rain, acted like a shield. Her outfit screamed expensive athleisure, though she looked about as likely to hit a yoga mat as she was to help the movers. Then came the dogs. One by one, on bedazzled leashes, a fluffy tidal wave of SIX Shih Tzus. My first thought was, that's an impressive amount of canine. My second, a small, cold seed of dread planting itself in my stomach, was an immediate, protective thought for my lawn. That seed of dread didn't take long to sprout. The very next morning, I was enjoying my first cup of coffee, gazing out at my perfectly manicured, dew-covered lawn, when my eyes landed on it. A fresh, unmistakable calling card. Right in the very center. A wave of dismay washed over me. Across the street, I could see Karen on her porch, phone clamped to her ear, one of her fluffy culprits sniffing around her own, much larger, but somehow less cared-for yard. There was no absolute certainty it was one of hers, but my gut screamed it was. I'm not someone who leaps to confrontation. My first instinct is always to assume the best, or at least the accidental. New neighbor, probably stressed. Maybe it was an oversight. So, later that day, when I saw her wrestling an armful of Amazon boxes from her porch, I took a deep breath, smoothed down my imaginary apron of neighborliness, and strolled across. Hi there, I started, aiming for warm and welcoming. I'm Sarah from across the street. Welcome to the neighborhood. She barely acknowledged my existence, just a curt, impatient nod, those sunglasses still firmly in place, reflecting my own slightly strained smile back at me. Karen, she announced, her tone flat. So I pressed on, trying to keep my voice light and unaccusatory. I just wanted to mention, I think one of your adorable little ones might have had a tiny accident on my lawn this morning. Karen finally turned her head a fraction, lowering her sunglasses just enough to peer at me over the rims. Her nails, I noticed, were long, perfectly shaped, and painted a rather aggressive shade of fuchsia. They tapped a rapid rhythm on her phone screen. Accident? She echoed, her voice laced with an indifference that was almost more offensive than outright rudeness. Dogs poop. It's what they do. It's grass. It'll wash away. My polite smile felt like it was cracking. Well, yes, I replied, trying to maintain my composure, but it's my grass. And our HOA is actually pretty specific about cleaning up after pets immediately. She made a sound, a little huff of air through her nostrils, that was pure disdain. Oh, please, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Are you going to be one of those neighbors? I have 6 dogs, you know. It's practically a full-time job. With that, she turned her back on me, fully absorbed in her packages again, leaving me standing there feeling like I'd been swatted away like an annoying fly. I stood there for a beat, a hot flush creeping up my neck. My hands felt tight. How could she possibly think that was okay? Well, if you could just try to make sure it doesn't happen again, I'd appreciate it, I managed to say to her, retreating back. I walked back to my own house, that seed of dread now a pulsing throb of definite irritation. This was going to be a nightmare. And a nightmare it rapidly became. The single tiny accident multiplied. Each morning brought a fresh constellation of unwelcome gifts scattered across my lawn. 2, sometimes 3, sometimes more. My beautiful green oasis was fast becoming a biohazard zone. The smell, especially as the days warmed up, began to greet me before I even opened my front door. Patches of my once lush grass started to turn a sickly yellow-brown. I felt a surge of helpless anger every single time I looked out my window. It felt like a personal attack. After a solid week of this daily defilement, I knew I had to try talking to Karen again. My politeness reserves were running low, but I had to attempt it. I intercepted her as she was leading her fluffy battalion out for their morning patrol. Karen, I called out, my voice probably a little sharper this time than I intended. She spun around, her face already set in lines of annoyance, her oversized designer handbag swinging like a weapon. What is it now? She snapped. It's still happening, I stated, trying to keep the tremor of anger out of my voice, and gestured pointedly towards the evidence on my lawn. Every single day. You absolutely have to clean up after your dogs, Karen. Or, at the very least, keep them off my property entirely. Her lips thinned into a hard line. Are you seriously accusing my babies again? She retorted, her voice rising. They are perfectly trained little angels. She then bent down to coo at one of the Shih Tzus, which chose that exact moment to lift its leg against my mailbox post. Aren't you, my precious muffin? You wouldn't dream of making a mess, would you? I had to physically bite the inside of my cheek to stop myself from screaming. Karen, I see them. I have these things called windows. And frankly, whether they do it on your lawn or mine, the HOA rules, which you agreed to, require you to pick it up immediately. Prove it, she shot back, her eyes narrowing. You have absolutely no proof it's my dog's. There are plenty of other dogs in this neighborhood, you know. My jaw felt like it was wired shut. There are no other dogs that regularly walk this specific route, and certainly not a pack of 6 identical ones. And to be honest, Karen, I'm beginning to suspect you're letting them do it here on purpose. That pushed her over the edge. How dare you? She shrieked, her voice climbing into a register that probably shattered glass in the next county. I am a highly responsible pet owner. Maybe if you spent less time spying on your hardworking neighbors and more time, I don't know, getting a hobby, you wouldn't be so miserable. She then gave a sharp tug on the leashes and stormed off down the street, her 6 little darlings trotting indignantly behind her, leaving a fresh deposit as a parting gift. That was the moment I decided my Ring cameras weren't just for casual observation anymore. They were for evidence. I started checking the footage religiously every single day. And there it was, undeniable and infuriating. Karen, strolling along with her fluffy entourage, pausing right at the edge of my lawn. She wouldn't even look. She'd just stand there, sometimes fiddling with her phone, sometimes just gazing into the middle distance with an air of utter boredom, as one, then two, then often three of her dogs would meander onto my grass, do their business, and then she'd just walk away. No baggie, no scoop, not a flicker of responsibility. I saved every clip. I meticulously noted the dates, the times. The digital folder of her transgressions grew daily. On a few horrifying occasions, I saw her subtly, almost imperceptibly, nudge one of the dogs with her foot, guiding it towards a particularly pristine patch of my lawn. It was calculated. It was deliberate. It was utterly maddening. My blood pressure felt like it was permanently elevated. I seriously considered marching straight over to Mr. Henderson's house with my tablet. But I hesitated. I really, truly didn't want to be that neighbor, the one perceived as a tattletale running to the HOA president for every little grievance. So I tried a more subtle approach. I drafted a very polite, very generic email and sent it through the official HOA online portal. It was a gentle reminder to all residents about the importance of pet waste removal and respecting private property lines. I named no names. I just hoped a general nudge might be enough to make her reconsider her reign of terror. Big mistake. Apparently, Karen possessed a finely tuned antenna for any communication that could possibly, even remotely, be construed as being about her. The very next day after that HOA email blast circulated, the situation went from bad to worse. I was in my home office, trying to concentrate on a design project, when I heard a distinct yapping and scrabbling sound. I looked out my window, and my heart sank. All 6 of Karen's Shih Tzus were not only on my lawn but were gleefully, destructively, off-leash, running amok through my newly planted, carefully tended flower beds along the walkway. My beautiful marigolds were being trampled into oblivion. And there was Karen, standing on the public sidewalk, phone pressed to her ear, a tiny, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. She caught my eye through the window, that smirk widening just a fraction before she made a lazy, theatrical gesture of calling her dogs back. My hands were actually trembling with rage. This wasn't just about negligence anymore. This was active, targeted harassment. The stress was becoming unbearable. I started to dread looking out my own windows. My home, my peaceful haven, felt like it was under siege. I felt a constant thrum of anxiety, a tightness in my chest. How could one person derive so much apparent pleasure from making someone else's life miserable? My attempts at a reasonable resolution had backfired spectacularly, making her bolder, more aggressive. Her entitlement wasn't just growing, it was thriving, feasting on my distress. I started losing sleep over it. The absolute breaking point, the moment that transformed my simmering resentment into a cold, laser-focused resolve, arrived on a Saturday morning. I was doing my usual grim review of the Ring footage from the previous day, bracing myself for the latest installment of the Poop Chronicles. But this was a masterpiece of malice. The video showed Karen, resplendent in her usual expensive workout gear that never saw a bead of sweat, marching her fluffy brigade with military precision directly onto the dead center of my lawn. It was almost like a bizarre, canine ritual. She stood there, arms crossed, surveying the scene like a general inspecting her troops, as at least 4 of the 6 dogs proceeded to do their business. One of them even had the audacity to lift its leg against my little ceramic garden gnome, which, I admit, felt like a deeply personal affront. And then, the act that sealed her fate. After the last dog had completed its unholy offering, Karen didn't just turn and leave.
No.
She took a moment to survey her handiwork, this deliberate defacement of my property. She then turned her head, slowly, deliberately, and looked directly at my front window, directly at where my Ring camera was positioned. A slow, venomously smug smirk spread across her face. And then she laughed. It wasn't a quiet chuckle. It was a clear, distinct, undeniably mocking laugh. The kind of laugh that conveyed pure, unadulterated contempt and the message, "I'm doing this, I know you see me doing this, I know you can't stand it, and not only is there nothing you can do, but I find your suffering absolutely hilarious." Then, with a final, satisfied glance, she spun on her heel and sauntered away, her 6 little minions trotting gleefully in her wake. I watched that particular clip at least 5 times. My blood first ran cold, then boiled over. The sheer, unmitigated audacity, the absolute, arrogant gall, the joy she clearly took in her nastiness. That laugh replayed in my mind on a loop. That was it. No more polite requests. No more trying to reason with a person who was clearly devoid of reason and decency. This woman wasn't just a neighborhood nuisance. She was a deliberate tormentor, actively deriving pleasure from my distress. I dedicated the rest of that Saturday to a new project, Operation Karen Takedown. I downloaded every single incriminating video clip. I organized them into a chronological timeline, complete with dates, times, and detailed notes on her specific actions. I even created a greatest hits compilation of her worst offenses, with the now infamous laughing incident as the grand finale. It was a comprehensive digital dossier detailing a campaign of canine waste and pure, unadulterated human entitlement. The real twist, if you want to call it that, wasn't some sudden, dramatic revelation about Karen's hidden motivations. Her motive was glaringly obvious. She was simply a terrible, entitled human being. The twist was in my decision. I was going to take this to Mr. Henderson. Not as Tom, my friendly neighbor, but as Mr. Henderson, the president of our homeowners association. I would lay out the entire, sordid saga, complete with irrefutable video evidence. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. A part of me worried, what if he thinks I'm overreacting? What if he tries to push for mediation again, to get us to talk it out? But Karen wasn't someone you could talk to. That laugh, though, that laugh had changed the entire dynamic. This wasn't just about dog poop anymore. This was about deliberate, malicious harassment, and I had the receipts. My heart hammered against my ribs as I picked up my phone and composed a formal message requesting an urgent meeting with him in his official HOA capacity. Mr. Henderson, to his credit, agreed to meet me the very next afternoon, a Sunday, at his home. I walked over, my tablet clutched in my hand like a sacred scroll, my stomach churning with a mixture of nerves and grim determination. He greeted me at his door, his expression serious but welcoming. "Sarah, come in," he said. "You indicated this was rather urgent." We settled into his tidy, quiet living room, a room that always smelled faintly of lemon polish and well-read books. I took a fortifying breath. "Mr. Henderson, Tom," I began, "I have a very serious and escalating problem with my new neighbor, Karen, the woman who moved in across the street. And it's reached a point where I genuinely need the HOA's formal intervention." He listened with unwavering patience, his hands clasped calmly in his lap, as I recounted the entire miserable saga. From the very first accident to the daily onslaught, my failed attempts at polite and reasonable discussion, her escalating hostility and dismissiveness, and finally, the off-leash destruction of my flower beds. His brow furrowed more deeply with each detail I shared. Then I delivered what I hoped would be the clincher. And I have video evidence of almost all of it. I opened my tablet, took another deep breath, and started playing the compiled footage. I watched his face intently as he saw Karen blatantly ignoring her dog's actions, then subtly guiding them onto my lawn, and then the clip of her standing there, surveying the mess, and laughing directly at my camera. When that mocking laugh echoed softly in his quiet living room, Mr. Henderson's expression, which had been steadily growing more somber, hardened into one of grim resolve. He was silent for a long, pregnant moment after the video concluded. My heart was pounding in my chest. What would he say? Would he understand the full extent of it? Finally, he looked directly at me, and his voice was heavy with disapproval. Sarah, he began, thank you for bringing this to my attention and for compiling such thorough evidence. To be perfectly frank with you, Ms. Karen, as you call her, has unfortunately already come to the HOA's attention for several other matters since she moved in. My eyes widened in surprise. She has? He nodded gravely. Indeed. Multiple complaints, actually. Noise disturbances from her residence, apparently. Those 6 dogs possess quite a remarkable lung capacity, especially when left unattended in her backyard for extended periods. Issues with improper trash disposal, leaving her bins overflowing at the curb for days on end. Even a couple of minor but unpleasant parking disputes with the residents directly adjacent to her. Nothing individually egregious enough, perhaps, for major disciplinary action up to this point, and she has proven to be exceptionally evasive. Always a convenient excuse, always a vehement denial, sometimes even attempting to deploy a rather unconvincing charm or play the bewildered victim when I've had to speak with her. He let out a weary sigh. She even had the audacity to suggest to me once that other residents were simply jealous of her beautiful dogs and were therefore fabricating complaints. I just stared at him, a fresh wave of indignation washing over me. So, she wasn't just a neighborhood menace. She was a practiced manipulator as well. But this, Mr. Henderson continued, his finger tapping the tablet screen where Karen's laughing, smirking face was still frozen in time. This is an entirely different category of offense. This isn't mere negligence. This is not a simple misunderstanding between neighbors. This, Sarah, is a clear and deliberate pattern of violating several key HOA covenants, specifically those pertaining to pet waste disposal, adherence to local leash laws, and, perhaps most critically, the foundational clause regarding respecting community standards and refraining from behavior that harasses or intentionally disturbs other residents. That laugh demonstrates unequivocal intent and, frankly, malice. A profound wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me lightheaded. He understood. He truly, deeply understood the severity of her actions. The HOA board, Mr. Henderson stated, his voice now carrying the full weight of his office, maintains a strict zero-tolerance policy for this kind of blatant, repeated, and documented disregard for our community rules and for the well-being of fellow residents, especially when it is supported by such incontrovertible evidence of ill will. I will require a copy of this complete footage, Sarah. I intend to call an emergency board consultation this very evening. And following that, I will be scheduling a formal meeting with Ms. Karen. I would very much like you to be present at that meeting if you feel comfortable doing so, as the primary complainant and key witness. I'll be there, I said, my voice surprisingly firm and steady. The thought of another direct confrontation with Karen was admittedly daunting, but the prospect of doing so with Mr. Henderson and the full authority of the HOA backing me up, armed with the undeniable truth, it felt not just possible, but necessary. Mr. Henderson, true to his word, moved with impressive speed. He scheduled the formal meeting with Karen for the following Tuesday evening, to be held in the small, neutral territory of the community clubhouse meeting room. Just him, me, and Karen. I spent most of that Tuesday feeling a strange cocktail of emotions, a knot of dread in my stomach, yet also a fierce, almost exhilarating sense of anticipation. This relentless harassment had to stop. Tonight it would. When I walked into the clubhouse meeting room, Mr. Henderson was already there, his laptop open on the table, a folder of papers beside it. He offered me a brief, reassuring nod. A few minutes later, Karen made her entrance. She swept in, Draped in yet another expensive-looking athleisure ensemble, her signature oversized sunglasses perched atop her head like a conquering monarch's crown, and an expression of profound, put-upon annoyance already firmly in place. Her perfectly manicured nails, a vibrant coral this time, tapped an impatient rhythm on the screen of her designer phone. "Let's just get this over with," she huffed, pointedly avoiding eye contact with me and directing her remarks solely at Mr. Henderson. "I have important things to do. My dog groomer is scheduled to arrive shortly." Mr. Henderson, unruffled, gestured to one of the empty chairs. "Please, Miss Karen, have a seat. We need to discuss several serious complaints that have been lodged regarding your residency." Karen executed a dramatic eye roll but complied, sinking into the chair with a sigh that suggested she was enduring a great trial. "Oh, is this about those utterly ridiculous anonymous complaints again?" she drawled. "I've already told you people around here are just jealous of my lifestyle." "Actually," Mr. Henderson stated, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority, "these are formal, documented complaints, and we now possess substantial and verifiable evidence. Ms. Sarah is present today as the primary complainant concerning the ongoing issues with your pets and the repeated trespassing on her private property." Karen finally swiveled her head to look at me, a disdainful sneer twisting her lips. "Her?" she scoffed. "Oh, for heaven's sake. She's completely obsessed with me and my dogs. It's just a little bit of dog poop. Honestly, some people need to get a life." My hands clenched tightly under the table, but I held her gaze, refusing to be intimidated. "It's been constant, Karen," I said, my voice low but firm. "And, it's been deliberate." "Ms. Karen," Mr. Henderson interjected, his tone becoming decidedly steelier, "the HOA has received numerous formal complaints regarding pet waste being left on common areas and, very specifically, on Ms. Sarah's private lawn. There are also multiple recorded instances of your dogs being off-leash in violation of community rules and local ordinances, and several noise complaints regarding excessive and prolonged barking from your residents." He paused, letting his words sink in. "And then, Ms. Karen, there is the overarching matter of your general conduct and lack of respect for your neighbors and community standards." He calmly turned his laptop so the screen faced her and began to play the curated video clips. Karen watched, her initial expression of bored indignation slowly morphing into one of visible irritation, then to a fleeting flicker of something else. Perhaps a dawning, uncomfortable awareness? When the clip of her dogs gleefully trampling my flower beds played, she let out a dismissive scoff. "Oh, please," she exclaimed. "They were just playing. They're energetic." But when the final, damning clip played, the one where she stood defiantly on my lawn, supervised the multi-dog poop parade, then looked directly into the camera lens and laughed, her face visibly paled beneath her expensive spray tan. The sound of her own mocking, arrogant laughter filled the otherwise silent room. A heavy, uncomfortable silence descended when the video ended. "So," Mr. Henderson said, his voice quiet but firm, "as you can clearly see, Ms. Karen, this is not, as you claim, about a little dog poop. This is about a persistent and escalating pattern of deliberate disregard for established community rules and a profound lack of respect for your neighbors and their property. This footage, particularly your reaction in it, demonstrates clear intent and, frankly, the board finds your apparent amusement at this situation to be deeply troubling and unacceptable." Karen finally found her voice, and when she did, it was shrill and offensive. "This is an outrage. This is harassment. You're all ganging up on me because I'm new. That video is completely taken out of context. My dogs are certified emotional support animals. You can't do this to me." "Actually, Ms. Karen," Mr. Henderson replied, his voice unwavering and resolute, "we can and we must. Your lease agreement and the HOA bylaws which you reviewed and signed, thereby agreeing to abide by them as a condition of your residency, are exceptionally clear on these matters. There are specific clauses pertaining to pet nuisance, prevention of property damage, mandatory adherence to local leash laws, immediate and thorough waste cleanup, and the overarching requirement to maintain community harmony and refrain from disruptive or harassing behavior. You have demonstrably violated multiple sections of these agreements repeatedly and with what appears to be clear and willful intent to cause distress. He calmly slid a sheaf of official-looking papers across the table towards her. This, Ms. Karen, is a formal notice from the Homeowners Association Board. Based upon the severity, persistence, and documented nature of these violations, coupled with your consistent unwillingness to address them constructively, indeed, your apparent enjoyment of perpetrating them, the board has voted unanimously. Your lease is hereby terminated. You have exactly 30 days from this date to vacate the premises. Karen stared at the papers as if they were venomous snakes, then her gaze darted wildly between Mr. Henderson and me. Her face began to contort with a mixture of disbelief and fury. It was like watching a dam of entitlement finally burst. "You can't evict me," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "For dog poop? This is utterly insane. I'll sue. I'll sue all of you. This is discrimination." Her voice rose to a veritable screech. "My babies need a yard. You're discriminating against me because I have 6 beautiful, precious, innocent dogs. Your number of pets," Mr. Henderson added, his voice still remarkably calm amidst her tirade, "also significantly exceeds the 2-pet limit explicitly stipulated in the HOA agreement for rental units of this size, Ms. Karen. That is another serious violation which you failed to disclose upon signing your lease. That infraction alone would be grounds for action. The catalog of other offenses simply cements the board's decision. The eviction is final and non-negotiable." Karen leaped from her chair, her face now a mottled landscape of enraged red and pale shock. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer," she screeched, snatching the papers and her handbag from the table. She turned her furious, blazing eyes on me. You obsessive psycho, with your creepy cameras," she spat. "You'll regret this." And with that final, impotent threat, she stormed out of the clubhouse, slamming the door behind her with such force that the windows visibly rattled in their frames. Mr. Henderson let out a long, slow breath and sank back slightly in his chair.
He looked over at me.
"Well," he said, a faint, weary smile touching the corners of his lips. "That went about as well as could be expected, I suppose." I felt a bizarre cocktail of emotions coursing through me. I was shaky, mentally drained, but also overwhelmingly, profoundly satisfied. The truth, backed by undeniable, irrefutable proof, had finally prevailed. The 30 days that followed Karen's eviction notice were memorable. She didn't, as threatened, produce a lawyer, or if she did, they evidently advised her that she didn't have a legal leg to stand on. Instead, she seemed to dedicate her remaining time in the neighborhood to being as performatively miserable and disruptive as possible. There were numerous loud, dramatic phone calls conducted on her front porch, clearly intended for an audience, detailing how unfairly persecuted she was. The moving process itself was a masterclass in chaotic inefficiency. Movers visibly struggled with an astonishing quantity of oversized furniture and what appeared to be several hundred dog toys and accessories. The 6 Shih Tzus, perhaps sensing the upheaval, yapped almost nonstop, adding their shrill chorus to the general pandemonium. Karen supervised the entire operation with the furious energy of a deposed queen, muttering dark imprecations under her breath whenever she caught sight of me or Mr. Henderson. The day the moving truck finally, blessedly, rumbled away from our street, a palpable sense of collective relief seemed to ripple through the neighborhood. Several other residents, who had apparently also endured their own minor but irritating run-ins with Karen's unique brand of entitlement, offered subtle nods or discreet thumbs up in my direction over the next few days. Mr. Henderson stopped by my house later that afternoon. "Just wanted to formally thank you again, Sarah," he said, his expression sincere. for your diligence, your patience, and your courage in bringing this serious matter forward. It's never easy, but your actions have helped to preserve the peace and uphold the standards of our community." I offered him a genuine, unforced smile. "Thank you, Tom," I replied, "for taking it all so seriously, and for being such an effective and fair HOA president. The best part of it all?
My lawn.
Oh, my beautiful, gloriously poop-free lawn. I spent the very next weekend lovingly reseeding the few remaining damaged patches, planting a fresh border of bright yellow marigolds, and just breathing in the tranquility. My Ring camera system went back to its mundane, reassuring job of recording squirrels scampering across the grass and the occasional delivery driver dropping off a package. It had been a strange and unexpectedly stressful journey, from a quiet, unassuming homeowner to a reluctant neighborhood watchdog, but the deep, abiding satisfaction of seeing such blatant, sneering entitlement meet its inevitable and just desserts was truly profound. Karen had laughed at my distress, laughed at my property, confident in her perceived untouchability. But in the end, her own arrogance, her own malicious actions, so clearly captured on camera, became the instruments of her own undoing. It was a potent, if unwelcome, reminder that sometimes, even in the quietest of suburbs, you have to stand firm for your home, your peace, and your sanity. And sometimes, a little bit of modern technology, combined with a good neighbor who believes in upholding the rules, can deliver a truly perfect slice of poetic justice. My little patch of green was mine again, completely and utterly, and it had never, ever looked sweeter.